Howdy, this is the Ranch Fairy. I'm out here at test lab number 2 and been wanting to do a trad video. There's a few videos reaching around and trying to show arrow flight. It's a couple of pretty good bear shaft tuning videos, but I'm gonna do my own because now there's a Ranch Fairy bear shaft trad kit, and I'm gonna show you how I bear shaft a stick bow. I have a pretty deep trad background. I shot trad for a decade. I sold all my compounds and shot a stick bow, and I was one of those guys who walked around the 3D tournaments kind of with that swagger that says I got a stick bow. One word of caution. Some people call them old ladies, but I don't call my wife an old lady. But if you convinced your old lady or significant other that trad is cheap and super inexpensive, you need to come work for me as a sales guy. Stay tuned. No starts. I need you to understand this is an instructional video. You're not going to be able to probably, if you've never done this before, just watch it and go out and do this. So I would suggest you take your phone, watch through the beginning parts, which is pretty straightforward, describing the basic strategy around it. But when you start actually cutting and shooting arrows, you need to stop at each section and shoot your bow and make sure you're staying on track. It's kind of like watching a video for fixing a car. You really want to know, hey, take this bolt first, because if you don't, then the shock's going to explode and it's going to shoot out and then hit you in the face, that kind of stuff. So use it more like an instructional video, but not something that you watch and go, like, I got this. Because if you cut your arrows off too fast, you ain't got this. It's okay, buy more arrows, but nah, you know. Here we go. What we came up with for trad is Sirius has built their new arrow called the Trad Star. It's brown wood grain. Okay, good stuff. You go to Sirius Archery and click on me. That's the Ranch Fairy section. And there is a Trad Star test kit. You're going to get 2 different spines. So just spitballing this, if you're shooting 40 to 50 pounds, which seems to be the new norm, my bow's 54 at 28, 70 inches long. It's a 21st century. And if you're shooting 40 to 50 pounds, you're going to want 500s and 400s. You're going to get 2 of each. Okay, so, and then above that, I would just increase the spine 1 level. So I'd go 400, 350. And if there's some big studly guy out there pulling 75 pounds, you're going to have to push up just that way. But I'm running 54 at 28. I don't get all the way back. I'm not a fixed hold shooter. I'm kind of a snap shooter. I hit my face and turn it loose. So I only shoot a 26.5, 27-inch arrow, even though the draw is 28. So I'm getting to about 50 pounds. Step 1, decide the point weight. You want to have a fixed point weight. Now in the kits, they offer a range of weights. And most of you folks are gonna put in, the kit's offered with a 100 grain full length insert. Just put that in there, have Sirius install it. I would do that, just have them show up. But if you wanna glue your own in, that's fine. Epoxy, Sirius has epoxy as well, so you can buy some of that, or whatever you use to attach them. So you're gonna have 100 grains in the shaft already, in insert weight, steel. And then you need to decide what kind of point you wanna shoot. 200, 300 grains. So the kit's gonna come with an array of field points, and that'll allow you to tinker around a little bit as you're cutting the shafts down. But really the best way to do this is fix the point weight, decide what you're gonna shoot, and then keep it constant, and then cut the shaft down until it flies. More to come on that. I shoot the 225 grain tough head on my bow. So, and then I add, it's a 100 grain insert, okay, 225 grain tough head, and then this is a 75 grain adapter that Tough Head offers. I put that in there. So the total point weight, where'd you go? The total point weight is 225 plus 75 or 300. So I have a total of 400 grains up front. I want the maximum amount of forward of center and perfect arrow flight. And it's really nice thing about the lighter spined arrows and the lighter draw weights of a stick bow, the shafts are lighter grains per inch. So you're able to maximize your forward to center. So you kind of want to spitball in your head, and really that range is 200 to 300, 200 or 300. There's not, you can cobble together a 265 or something like that. And if you choose to do that, it's fine. You just need to make the field points work out. And so you're going to have to dig, and once again, you convince your significant other that this was cheap, and then you decide you're going to shoot 265 grain heads, and you have to go buy more stuff to make a 265 grain head, which is fun. Step 2, you need a saw. This is a saw. This is the arrow length part. This is actually from Dr. Ed Ashby. He gave it to me. And that's the wing dinger cutoff part. Pretty straightforward. Okay. You can see over here I have notes. So my bow that I've got in my hand shoots, once I got it cut down, I'm going to show you how you're going to do that. It shoots a 400 trad star, 26.5 inches with a 300 grain point. Now I don't write the insert because my own arrows, I know I'm putting a 100 grain insert in, so I did not write that down. Step 3, cut your arrows and start shooting. Before we begin, let me remind you that if you think traditional is cheap, I'm probably going to say that about 4 more times. So you need a saw or some way to cut the shafts off and walk them in. Here we go. So the kit will come. All the shafts are going to be full length, 2 different spines. You're going to leave one full length. So you can always have, well, it'll be your test arrow, but you'll always have one you can say, oh boy, if you overcut the first one, you can always go back and start close and start working down. This is a test kit. You're probably not going to end up with more than 1 arrow out of the kit that flies right. Now, the reason why we're offering 2 spines, some of you people, there seems to be a rage now that there's a lot of point-on shooting, and you want to have a longer arrow, which I totally don't agree with because the impact paradox is outrageous. I was shooting with somebody the other day, and I haven't shot trad in a long time. And they were shooting a stick bow, and I said, well, how'd you tune your arrows? Just, asking around. And they said, well, we tuned it to the length so that my point on was at 25 yards. And I'm just going through all the motions in my head of arrow flight and impact paradox. These arrows were like 4 inches longer than the front of the shelf. Now, if that's the length that flies bare shaft, I get that. But if your goal is to shoot a really long arrow to make sure that your point on distance is a certain distance, you need to consider the fact that a stiffer arrow is a shorter, stiffer arrow, has higher forward of center, is stiffer on impact and better for penetration and not just hitting the target. Just my own thing. So y'all can bash me on the message boards and all the trad boards and all that stuff and say I'm an idiot. I'm used to that by now. It's okay if you haven't watched much of the Ranch Fairy and you're new to me, then trust me, I get a lot of heat. But I would prefer to shoot the most efficient tool for penetration at impact with your target animal and not just for aiming. I would work on that in practice. But whatever you want to do, you do that. We have a stiffer arrow in there. If you want to have a longer arrow, fine. Then the longer arrow, you'll shoot the stiffer one. And I recommend shooting the on spine or the softer spine arrow and try to shorten it up. Obviously, it could cut to the point. If you get all the way to the shelf, cutting it off and it still doesn't fly, then you got to go to the stiffer arrow, and that's why there's multiple spines and they're all full length. But remember the deal. Shoot 1 arrow full length, look at what it does, and cut the other one, but don't cut both of them right off the bat. Save that one for your, something like a, oh crap arrow. So I'm going to show you what you want to see. I've already got these cut down, but this is, this one's full length, okay? And what you want to see, you actually want to see the arrow go in and be way to the left. I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, it's backwards. That means the spine is too soft. And that's what you want. Then you can cut it down and stiffen it up. I cut them from the knock in because I'm practical. If you guys who are real OCD and you got to have the label in this spot, I don't care. I want it to fly right. But if you're OCD and you want to pull the insert every time, you know, that's fine. I'd use hot melt and try not to melt the carbon. But you're going to shoot your arrow with your point. So hang on. Okay. I put in my 300 grain point because I decided I'm going to shoot 300 grains up front, 400 actually with the insert. So I'm going to fling one down there and we'll see what happens. Hang on. This is 10 yards or so. I shot it and we got the results we wanted. We want that shaft kicked out to the left. That's the goal. That means we can cut it off and it'll stiffen up. So we'll go back to this table and cut it off. Now you're gonna wanna make like 1 inch cuts right off the bat. And then as it gets closer and closer, you're going to want to start cutting less and less. Each cut, as you get closer to perfect, makes a big difference. So first cut, I'm just gonna cut the knock end off because I'm practical. All right. I gotta take the point out to put it in the saw. So doesn't have to be super precise. I'm going to cut 1 inch off. Done. I'm going to shove the knock back in and we'll fling it again. Put the point back on. If you leave the point on, it makes the shaft artificially long. Put the point back on. About the same result. So that was an inch cut, and I still got crazy. I'm shooting from back there, but still kick to this direction, to the left, right? I'm right-handed shooter and going like this on impact. That's what I was talking about having a really long arrow. You'll see when it stiffens up. That's a big deal on impact. All right, we'll go back and cut it. All right, so I cut it another inch and it was really boring. It was better, but it wasn't great. So we're just gonna jump forward. So you need to just keep cutting it off, and what'll happen is it'll start to true up. So I got a shaft down to this one's 27 and a half, and I'm going to start to show you how critical it starts to get. 26 and a half is my number. It doesn't hit the front of the shelf and it flies really good. I'm going to show you what 27.5 looks like. I changed my mind. I decided to move a little faster. So what I did was I shot the full length shaft of the 300 grain point. Then I shot a 27 and a half and a 27 inch arrow with 300 grain points. And here's the results. You can see that the full length arrow really was off to the side, right? It's easier from this angle. So this is the full length arrow. You can see how cattywampus and kicked off to the side it is. They look pretty good, right? when you get behind them, is the 27-inch arrow. And it is almost dead plumb where I'm shooting straight behind me. The 27.5 is just a little cattywampus off to the left. Okay, you can see that right there. Just a little bit, it's not much. So what you do is you keep repeating the test. I'm gonna shoot that test again. I'm not gonna put the full length arrow in there, okay? I already kind of knew where I needed to land. 26.5 to 27 inches is the magic number. Now, get this in your head. If you can get these things to fly and you take this time, and it's going to take a while. You need to just get organized and don't try to do this in 15 minutes before you got to go to a baseball game with your kids. Give yourself an hour and a half. I've done this a lot, and I just kind of know how much to cut it off. I'm going to shoot a 26.5, a 27, and a 27.5, and then I'll show you the results. That's 26.5, 27, 27.5, okay? Hang on, see if I can get this to focus on them. You can see that the 26 and the 27 are more this direction, and the 27.5, it's only because I can see down range and I know where I was shooting from that I know that the 27.5 was flying a little bit, like you'll see it in the air, you'll see it like that. And the 27 and the 26.5 really went right down the middle on flight. But I saw the 27.5, just, it's not bad, but it's just a little bit. So I kept cutting it, right? You'll notice that the cuts started getting small. So what'll happen is, you'll get a, you'll get a big one, like you'll get your full length bear shaft will look like that. You'll cut off inch and a half, and it'll start to look like this. More towards the sight line behind you. They'll improve, right? The target line is back there. I'm shooting by that table. So, you see where I naturally would stand. You see how these two arrows right here are facing over there? And then as I cut the shaft off, we're more down the sight line by the table. It's a little bit to the side because I stabbed them into the target, right? I just want you to get an example. So from back here, they're coming in. They look like this in the air. And then you cut them and they start to progressively do this. And then all of a sudden they'll go down the middle. When you start to get one that looks a little clean, maybe like this, you start cutting 1/4 inches off. Take your time. This is not something you do in a hurry. Step 4, you're not that good. So you need to accept that occasionally you're going to pull a shot. The release isn't going to be as clean as normal, and you're going to throw a couple. So as you test, don't just shoot it once and cut it off. Shoot it a couple times, see kind of consistent results, and if it keeps going in a little sideways, then cut it off a 1/2 inch, cut it off a 1/2 inch, cut it off a 1/2 inch. But you have to accept that you're human. You have to accept occasionally you're going to throw one. I've also found that the softer arrows tend to be knock high a little bit too. And originally I thought that was a knock point issue, but I don't think it is. I think the shaft is flexing this way and kicking this way and is flying in like that, okay? I don't think it's a knock point issue because as I cut the shafts, they started to go in pretty level. Now, if you cut the shafts and cut the shafts and cut the shafts, it's always knock high. You need to lower your knock point a little bit. There's not a lot of adjustment on a stick bow. But don't worry about if your arrow's pretty level across the shelf and on your knock point with a full length arrow and it goes in kind of like this. I know it is. I just can't prove it. The shaft's going like this and like that. And then it's flying in kind of like this. So that is just the shaft over flexing in any direction. The energy's got to go somewhere, and it's a big old point, right? So when you let go, the first thing to move is the knock, and then the shaft flexes and the point starts moving. It doesn't move as a unit. The energy's got to transfer. So the shaft, you let go of the string, the knock, it hits the knock, and then it says, oh, woo! And I think the energy goes here and here because of the way I see it fly. And just inherently by outcome-based testing, as I shorten the arrows, they seem to start to plumb in. So don't get too freaked out about the knock high right off the bat with a really soft, long arrow. That's how to do it. So if you decide to shoot the softer spine first and you cut down to the point, you got to start checking this when the arrows get really short, where the field point's riding up on the shelf. You can't shoot broadheads that way. So you're gonna have to go to the stiffer spine or lower the point weight. Okay, I said decide on a point weight. Sure, until it's impractical, right? So if you have too much point weight for the spine arrow, if it's under spine, like if I got a 600 spine arrow, I'd have to cut it like 20 inches long. It would never work, right? Or I could short draw it, maybe Cupid shoot it, but that's not gonna fly. So you want it to fly. Accept you're human, take your time. Final step, back up to 20. All right, just as soon as you think 10 yards is good, when you back up to 20, most likely the shaft that is, let's say you do 10 yards, you find an arrow, it's running down the middle, you say, man, that's awesome. You need to back up to 20. And that's when you start cutting, you pull the nock, and I mean you cut off 2 blade widths. You make little tiny adjustments at 20. Don't cut off big hog. And in the beginning you were cutting off an inch, no change, and then you went down to half and a quarter as it started to come in. When you get back to 20, it gets twice as critical. So just trim off a couple of blade widths and shoot it again. It takes your time. And if you get frustrated or something, stop. Leave that shaft, mark it with something, go inside, whatever you gotta do. But don't get frustrated, okay? And then just say, it's fine, it's close enough, because it's not, right? You're trying to get perfect arrow flight. You get a bare shaft flying at 20, it's gonna be unbelievable when you fletch them. I mean, just think about that. When that arrow's flying bare shaft and you can get it to fly perfectly at 20, when you put fletches on, it's gonna be super clean coming off the bow, which contributes to penetration, accuracy, penetration, which is really important if you're going to go hunting. So back up to 20. Cut the shafts off really, just pull the nock and cut them off, trim them off, really little spots. And then you will be ready to go. Time to fletch after that. Okay, well, there's one more thing. As usual, I never remember to storyboard and stuff because that's boring. Caught some nice bass today. Just saying. When you're done and you get your arrow length correct, you'll go back to serious. I recommend you stay with the same arrow, the exact same arrow. If you change the type of arrow, it may change the way it flies, despite being a 400 spine other brand of arrow. They may not all bend the same. I don't know. I'm just saying, if you've already cut one brand down, why would you change anything? So go to Serious Archery, click on my face, and buy bare shafts. You could have them hand square them, install the inserts, ship to your bare shaft, ready to fletch, or of course you could, cut them off yourself. If you have your own saw, you're probably gonna just wanna buy, full length and then cut them to your length, go through that whole process and install your own inserts yourself. Sirius has insert epoxy on their website, so buy some of that good stuff. And you can do that yourself or have them do it. So that's the last step. Whatever shaft you choose to use for this process, stay with that arrow, because you saw how critical it was when you're shooting. And I need to test this, but I think if you change arrow shaft brands, there's a possibility that those cuts may be a quarter or half inch off. And once again, we're trying to get perfect arrow flight. Why go through the process and not just stick with what you got? All right, now we're done. Hit that subscribe button and share this around. And if you got any hate mail, Troy@ranchfair.com. I love hate mail. I love the trad guys to rampage all over me. It's going to be great because I have now invaded the sacred world of trad. But for all your reasonable characters, let me know how this goes. And I love to see it. And then when you shoot critters, send me pictures, because that's awesome. And that's really the goal, I think, is to shoot critters. Yeah, that is. Ranch Fairy out.